This recording is from Chapter 8, specifically about defining memory. A quote I really like is by L.M. Montgomery, and it is, "Nothing is ever really lost to us as long as we remember it." I think that's a good reminder that everything is in our brain, essentially. We just have to bring it forth and we have to remember it. So let's define memory. Memory is the set of processes used to encode, store, and retrieve information over different periods of time. So let's specifically look at encoding, storing, and retrieving. There are three types of encoding. The first is semantic encoding, which is the process of encoding information into memory based on its meaning or significance rather than its physical characteristics or appearance. This type of encoding focuses on the conceptual understanding of information, allowing for deeper, more meaningful storage and retrieval of memories. So, for example, some of you might have heard of Roy G. Biv, which is the mnemonic for memorizing the color spectrum. It, of course, stands for red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. So that's an example of semantic coding, encoding information based on its meaning. Visual encoding refers to converting new information into mental pictures or visual representations that can be stored in memory. For example, when we meet a new person, we visually encode their facial features. Obviously, so we'll recognize them if we see them again. Acoustic encoding specifically is encoding by sound, for example, remembering the words to a song. So there's visual encoding and acoustic encoding. Let's look at automatic versus effortful processing. Automatic processing would include the location of items. We automatically process where they are, time, sequence of the day's events automatically processed, and frequency, how many times things ever have happened. That would be automatic processing. Effortful processing would be rehearsal. Simple repeating keeps it STM. Elaborate rehearsal would be thinking and making connections to other learned ideas. So we're either maintaining rehearsal, which means we're just simply repeating information over and over until it's processed into our brain. An elaborate rehearsal would be a deeper processing where we're thinking and making connections to other ideas. After a memory is encoded, it is stored. Remember, there's encoding, storage, and retrieval. Once the information has been encoded, we have to somehow retain it. Our brains take the encoded information and place it in storage. Storage is the creation of a permanent record of information. So we encode things, and just because we encode it, we see it or hear it, doesn't always mean we're going to store it and maintain the information. So there are three stages the storage will pass through. Sensory memory, which as I mentioned is simply encoding it. This is very brief storage that only lasts a few seconds. Our senses are constantly bombarded with sight, sound, taste, etc. Bombarded so much that obviously we can't take in all those things. We can sense all those things, but we can't really encode all of those things. Short-term memory, a component of memory that holds a small amount of information in an active, readily available state for a brief period. So it's just a step beyond sensory memory. It lasts about 15 to 30 seconds and is limited to around 7 to 9 items. An example of this would be memorizing a phone number, which is obviously 12 numbers, or no, 10 numbers, I apologize. And memorizing a phone number until you dial it. So you're going to remember that phone number for around 20 seconds, and then it's gone once you dial it. So that's your short-term memory. Long-term memory, as I'm sure you're aware, is a memory stage in which information is stored for a long period of time, perhaps permanently, and whose capacity is essentially unlimited. Essentially, our brains have an unlimited capacity for memories. You're never going to run out of space in your brain to keep a memory. Let's look at a little bit further at long-term memory. Rehearsal. Active rehearsal is a way of attending to information to move it from short-term to long-term memory. So if you go back to the phone number, if we actively rehearse and repeat that phone number, it's probably going to move out of our short-term memory into our long-term memory, and we'll probably remember it ongoing past 15 to 20 seconds. Explicit memory is those things we consciously try to remember, recall, and report. For example, studying for a test. Obviously, when you're studying for a test, you want to later be able to consciously recall that information. Implicit memory is the use of saved information without conscious awareness that it's being recalled. For example, riding a bike. That's saved information in your brain, but you don't really have to consciously think, okay, I'm going to remember how to ride a bike. It just happens. You're not really aware that it's being recalled. Semantic memory versus episodic memory. Semantic memory is object knowledge learned over many interactions. For example, if you interact with an apple, you know that it's edible. It's a fruit. It has a stem. It has seeds. It comes from a tree. It might be red or it might be green, and it's sweet. So you've interacted with an apple over a number of times, and so you know those factors about it. Episodic memory, on the other hand, is memory for specific events that you have experienced. That would be an event of remembering going to an apple festival, for example. It's just a remembering events instead of remembering things. So after a memory is stored, the goal is to be able to retrieve it. Retrieval is the act of getting information out of memory storage and back into conscious awareness. Remember, the steps are: we want to encode, we want to store, and then we want to be able to retrieve the information. There are three types of retrieval. Recall is the first one, means you access information without cues. For example, taking an essay test. When you take an essay test, you don't get cues from multiple choice or anything like that. You just completely have to remember everything. So that's recall. Recognition is the ability to recognize information that you previously viewed. That would be like taking a multiple choice test. You don't have to recall everything, you just have to recognize the information. Relearning involves learning information that you previously learned. And we're usually able to relearn information quicker than it was originally learned. So that's important to remember. If you've kind of lost something in the recesses of your brain, it's usually easier to relearn it than it was originally learned. So that's it for defining what memory is. Remember, it's encoding, storage, and retrieval, those three parts. Thank you for listening, and please let me know if you have any questions.